So I want to hear about you before we
Okay.
spend a bunch of time talking about me, because I'm totally boring.
Well, that
What's so great about this festival, like in our email correspondence, is that you love actual short films, and the thing that I'm finding is that I never win an award for any of the festivals, because it seems like the festivals really pay tribute to films that have a specific kind of narrative, which to them requires a certain running time, that there needs to be more time for an arc to occur. Whereas for me, I like watching a lot of really great British advertising that, like the Glazier has done, Frank Budgeon has done, and I'm not thinking of the other one who I really like right now, but I love tight impact. So I was
yeah.
wondering what it is that inspired you to do something like this.
Well, I appreciate you you saying that, Chris. I'll tell you a little bit of history of the festival itself. Obviously, the shit hit the fan last March for everyone, and myself and a colleague that I work with, and we both produce content for freelance work for a local community in that. We were going to send short films to each other, and then just say, oh, whilst we're locked down, we can't really produce anything outside the house. Why don't we try and make short films at home and send them to each other? And then I had the moment where I said, oh, why don't we open this to more people? And then the idea really grew in my head. Everyone's that's creative or makes short films is in the same boat. So why don't we open this up? And there's, it's very difficult for anyone at the lowest level to make something longer than 3 or 4 minutes, because there's so much time you have to spend developing the idea and the costs and everything of, say, anything north of 15 minutes. It kind of spirals, and I thought, oh, we really want to open this up to something that's a minute long up to 3. And I don't know if you've seen the best film winner from last year from our festival. It was from France, and what he achieved, it feels very Terrence Malick. It's brilliantly shot. It's just one chap with his, I think it was a GH5 with his family, and the story he managed to tell was just so tight within that 3 minutes. It was a beautiful piece of work. I'll send you a link after this. And it was like when I saw your film, Big Touch. It was the second film, the day after we opened for submissions. The first film was a really fun film from LA. Fun as in terms of the kind of the way he approached lockdown and the insanity that ensues with that. A lot of people went through. But then I kind of watch them myself before I share them within the team, because we're a very small team. And then the judges that don't see them until after 23rd of May, when our judging process starts. So I feel really lucky, very, very lucky to see all these films before anyone in terms of for our festival. So when I saw your film, I was like, oh my God, there's been a few moments like that in terms of when you see a piece of art or something that really impacts you or has an emotional connection to you, it makes it all worthwhile. Like I saw Jackson Pollock years ago in the Tate Modern in Liverpool, it's north of here, and I don't know what it was. It was something about the piece of art that just really connected with me. And I'd seen his stuff before, but I want to compliment you on Big Touch. It's a great short, and there's kind of some real elements to it that connected with me. There's almost like a fantasy to it as well.
But thank you. I'm going to interrupt you though. So the 3 minute or 1 to 3 minute length was more out of desperation is the mother of invention, I guess.
Absolutely.
you and a friend, like it sort of organically happened because like, well, what can we do that's within our means that will still be impactful? So is that what you're saying about it? Okay.
Absolutely. And I've seen so much great content on Instagram that is a minute long. Obviously, a lot of people target a minute because of likes and views and all of that. We weren't looking at a Instagram kind of connection. Oh, it's just a minute. That's the best thing to do, or 3. And I started looking at short films online and what was achievable. I know what's achievable in terms of great content in terms of 3 minutes, but seeing that come in, and we had submissions from a 10-year-old that did stop animation. We had a student that submitted a film about a fly that was bored in isolation, and it was just this. It was so well. I'll send you all of these. These are seriously great films, and to tell a really tight story within that amount of time, that was what kind of led us to that, really. And we have had we had inquiries a couple of weeks ago or so about longer submissions. So we've actually opened a second category. They're not kind of, there's not, we wanted to make sure we had 2 categories in terms of length of time. We didn't want to kind of, judge one over the other because we're giving it more breathing room or perceived breathing room. We wanted to, because we just had previous filmmakers and some submissions that I'd seen, and they would send us in. So we really want to submit this, but you're not open to a longer film. So we thought, right, let's open that up to a second group. I contacted our 3 main judges, and they were happy to kind of look at that as well. And we've had some disgusting horror, which is great. I love horror, and then some really nice stories as well. And we've just had our first Japanese film. We didn't have any from Japan last year, but we had them from all over. And it's just under 10 minutes animation. And they spent the last 2 years putting that together. And it's only a group of about 12 people. But the film, when I saw it, I'm like, wow, the standards are extremely high. So yeah, it was I like kind of that amount of time. There's an idea I'm toying with for something outside of festivals for a short film, and it's going to be a 3-minute promo for this local tour company. But I asked them, I'm happy to do all the work. I just want it as a short film, and I know what's achievable within 3 minutes. So I kind of wanted to see what people could do. And then when we get in submissions from literally South America, Australia, New Zealand, Russia, different parts of Asia, it's kind of a responsibility and a really good one to kind of curate all of this content, So it kind of grew out of nothing to something, and it coincided with a festival in Canada last year as well. So we've got some great submissions from that, and some new ones that have carried over. So yeah, it's grown from nothing to something really interesting. And last year who did we have? The directors duo based out of Germany. They do a lot of stuff, and they work with Marvel. We had Vance Burberry, who's a cinematographer. He worked with Guns N' Roses. They shot Sweet Child of Mine and a bunch of other stuff as well.
Cool.
Yeah. So this year we wanted to kind of diversify the judges. So we've got Akiko Sterenberger, who's a poster designer.
That's how I found you.
Her work's, you've seen it.
Yeah.
Her work's absolutely beautiful. And the way I found her initially was an unfinished piece of work from Under the Skin, the Scarlett Johansson movie. And that's a great piece of work. And Jonathan Glazer wanted to use it, but the studio changed their minds about the marketing.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh.
So yeah, we've put an interview up on YouTube now with her. We've got Garth de Bruin Austin, a great cinematographer as a judge as well. And he's just finished a documentary about poaching in South Africa. It's an absolute pleasure to do it, really. And we interviewed, I think, 37 of our 110 submissions last year. It was too many interviews in the end. So we've reduced that to about 15 this year, just for we wanted to make sure they weren't being released too far after the festival as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I really thank you so much for submitting your film Big Touch. I absolutely loved it, and I loved the look. I've got obviously a lot of questions about reasoning you shot it on film and all of that.
Sure.
And yeah, before we start, what are the 4 posters on your wall?
Oh yeah, let me find my glasses, and then I will tell you what did I do with my glasses. We'll see if you can guess any of them.
Oh, I obviously I can see the title of the furthest one on the right, but I don't. I know John Cassavetes from Rosemary's Baby, but yeah, I don't know them.
All right. So let's see. We've got Love Streams is there, which was Cassavetes' last film, and then that is Truffaut. It's the last of the Antoine Doinel cycle, which is Bed and Board, and then that one is Pacino's first film, Panic in Needle Park, and then the one behind the lamp is called Score by Radley Metzger. Why these posters, I don't really know. They've been on my wall in various iterations for many years. I think so before I moved to LA, I lived in Portland for like 20 some odd years in a 10-foot by 12-foot studio apartment without a bathroom. So it was basically just a bedroom, a kitchenette, and somehow having movie posters of couples was soothing to me. And if I brought somebody home with me and that's what they saw, there was, I think, automatically a certain kind of comfort level, because these are displays of affection. So I just, these are the images that I'm comfortable with. Although I absolutely, my 2 favorites that are on the wall are the Cassavetes film. Anything by John Cassavetes is, I can watch for the rest of my life over and over and over again. And then Score, which is more of a guilty pleasure than it is a great film. But the reason I decided to change my life completely by moving to LA was because on the what was it? I think March 31st, 2017, I had a bunch of friends over. I should qualify that I'm a Withnail and I fanatic. And in 2013, when Richard Griffiths, who plays Uncle Monty, died, it started a new tradition of always having an Uncle Monty memorial roast on the 28th of March. So in 2017, I had the usual friends over who also love Withnail, and I cook. So we had like a standing rib roast and potato pave and like a pavlova. I always imagined that Uncle Monty, like his favorite dessert would be a pavlova because it's meringue and kind of feminine and with cream and like passion fruit over the top of it. Anyway, so one thing leads to another, and an all night of dancing, and then woke up in the morning and found out that Radley Metzger had died. Radley Metzger may have described himself as a silk hat to the world of porn chic in the 70s to Russ Meyer's Sow, who would wear the hat. So all of his stuff was very elegant, and he partially believed, maybe jokingly, that so long as the characters in his film were in evening gowns and bow ties, nobody would be offended by the sexuality. I absolutely adore, flaws and all, Radley Metzger's films. And so when we all woke up hungover and read that Radley Metzger had died, I kind of felt like a door had opened, and I thought, well, gee, I really need to get more serious about my own filmmaking. So I applied to the American Film Institute and got in, and I thought that that would sort of somehow get me on the path back to filmmaking. So that poster is always a reminder of why I'm here,
Yeah.
not to lose sight, which I often do, just because it's a very difficult journey of what it is that I want. I mean, what really was making him unique at the time too was that the erotica that he was seeing in mainstream filmmaking when he was growing up was always shaming the female protagonist for having those feelings. And he just thought that didn't work at all. And so if you watch any of his films, his allegiance is to the female protagonist's sexuality, and that as a demonstration of her freedom. And it's always the cuckold man who's falling at her feet is always the weaker one. And I've just always liked it. Like, that's always just been the turn on for me. Like, emotionally, that's a great turn on.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in a woman who's like totally owns her sexuality, and then the man is like, I don't know what's going on. So he's, and I wish, particularly right now with the way that things are, that he would make a comeback, that people could go back to his films and go, oh, you know what? There were some films that were being made that are sexual and funny and are driven by a female narrative. So that's why that one's up there. So sex is on one end of the wall, and then love is on the other end of the wall.
I love the idea of that comfort you kind of had on the wall. And I guess that you can, like, I wasn't ever passing judgment when I was in university in terms of the film course that I was on, but you always kind of thought, oh, what's everyone got on their walls? Because I knew everyone would have posters, and there was this kind of, even though it's a good film, but everyone seemed to have Scarface or certain movies, and kind of I made great friends with people that had really small, like different kind of old posters. Like I had, what did I have? I had a Torn Curtain poster I bought. It was an original Torn Curtain poster, and I ended up, my best friend to this day, our first chat was about this poster when he saw it, and that's kind of got real reverence for me. And then October last year, I ended up working with the chap who was the production designer on Torn Curtain with Hitchcock, and it was Joe Alves, who was the production designer on Jaws and Close Encounters, and he was a judge for our horror festival. So it was a real kind of head spin, and so yeah, I've got a real connection for many reasons, where I bought it, who I was with, and then and Joe said to me, yeah, I'm happy to sign it if you want me to send it over, but I said it's a bus stop poster, it's massive, so it'll be a real issue sending that over. But yeah, it was so yeah, I can totally understand why, you know, there's certain things, and like I've got a John Carpenter European tour poster here because I'm a huge fan of his work, because I like kind of the small budget horror. I'm a huge 80s fan, especially horror. And yeah, and I've got my Third Man poster just at the back here, because I love a real mix, a real mix. And what I like about the score poster is the kind of design aesthetic of that. I've got a family plot poster as well, and it's not the best Hitchcock film, you know, it's last, but it's just something about, it's a beautiful piece of work, the actual poster. So yeah, I can definitely see the reasoning behind, and it's got, you know, real memories in that as well, especially, you know, having them for such a long time. When did you kind of really start making films? Was that did you make films in Portland before you moved to LA?
Yeah. Um, Geez. Wow. How, when, where did I start making movies? I kind of don't know. I mean, I was a child of the 80s, growing up in the suburbs outside of Chicago. And so just like you see in John Hughes movies, I grew up around, I was never one of them, but around families who could afford a camcorder. And and so my friends and I would just shoot everything and anything, and it was utterly boring and useless. And I think that one of the reasons we did that is because my little group of friends were all guys, and for guys, it's easier for them to relate through something rather than
Yeah.
directly. And so it was a way to have a shared experience, which was very cheap and entertaining to us. But I mean, it just didn't amount. You know, you look at like Sam Raimi's early work, and it wasn't organized like that in any way. And I don't have an explanation for why, other than it was just a way for us to see each other in a different way through a camera and then on a television. So, but um, I fell in love with the idea of filmmaking when I was 15. On the weekends when my dad was done with work, in most cases, um, he would we'd go to the movies and see whatever it was. And so, for those who may not be familiar with what the 80s looked like, there was a lot of pulp at the time, which I loved. I ate it up. And the big successful pulp, of course, is Star Wars and Jaws and Close Encounters and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I loved all that stuff. It was a perfect time to be exposed to cinema because it had everything. And if you were a kid, it was really some of the best. But at age 14, it was Friday, and it was 4 or 5 something, and we just chose something, and we walked into the theater, and the film had already begun. And I remember really vividly walking down the aisle and just seeing a big close up of fingers on an old, well, now it's old, but a cable box that changes between channels, and then it cuts to a man on a sofa as he's bored out of his mind, and then he opens up a copy of Tropic of Cancer by Henry Miller, and there's a woman's phone number in there, and he makes a call, and then it sets him off on this adventure. And there was a moment early on in the film when he goes to her apartment, and and there's a set of keys that are dropped down to him, and it intercuts between our point of view of the keys and his point of view of the keys coming towards him. And the way that the keys fell and the way that they landed stretched time in a way that I had never experienced before. And it wasn't just that I felt like I was falling. I felt like I was kind of, I don't know, just stretched in time. And I hadn't seen anything like that before. So it really was that moment when I thought, oh, hold on, there's something else that filmmaking can do that's making me have a visceral reaction beyond my emotional experience. The film was After Hours by Martin Scorsese, which I was also attracted to because of its Shaggy Dog type story. And at the end of it, I was just utterly baffled by it. And my dad had to work that night. My dad was a professor. So he dropped me off in the university library. He went to his class to teach for 4 hours. And then I just researched this guy named Martin Scorsese, and I didn't really understand what a director was. And I made a list of all of the films that he talked about. And then I saw all the films, and then my world just exploded. And I thought naively at that time, well, this is what I want. And so it was After Hours by Scorsese that made me think that someday I could maybe make something. And the things that I was attracted to in all of his work, especially After Hours, which I think is more suitable for a 14-year-old in some ways than all the violent movies that he did, was how he was using editing to create language, which I hadn't seen before. I hadn't noticed before. I'm not saying that they were lacking at all. Like, E.T. is great. They're all great. All of those films from the 80s, the big pop films, were really great. But this was really drawing attention to the language. And that's what was really turning me on the most about filmmaking. So that was kind of the path. I mean, and then when in Portland, Oregon, I mean, that's a long story about how I got there, but when I did get there, I had auditioned for a short film. And when I got cast in it, it opened up a whole world of animation. It was not an animated film, but it was made by people who worked at an animated studio, which was really hot in the 80s, called Will Vinton Studios. They were famous for, if you're an American audience, you might know the California Raisins. They did a bunch of claymation animation, literally bits of clay that get moved and shot. So through acting in the short film, I ended up in the world of animation and post-production. And so having met these amazingly talented people there is when I thought, okay, maybe I can make a film. There was film school that was in there as well. I went to the London International Film School in 1990, and that's a whole other very romantic story. That was part of my life, is living in England and going to the Scala Cinema, which totally changed my life, and the Everyman and the Electric and Jesus Christ, the repertory cinema that was happening in the 90s. 300 different films playing every week, listed in a copy at the time out. Most of us were just skipping school, so that we could see 3 or 4 films every day. It was amazing. So a huge part of my education has just been from the exposure, the broad exposure to films, which I wouldn't have been able to see in the theater had I not lived in London during the 90s. So yeah, so that's sort of an abbreviation of the lean years.
Was there any particular, just a little side note, was there any particular theatre you remember going to, or was it at the London Film School that you saw viewings, or was it actually at cinemas?
The Scala. The Scala was my life. The Scala is still my life. When Jane Giles released her huge coffee table book, I have 4 copies. I kept one for myself and I gave the other 3 away. My girlfriend has the T-shirt, the replica membership card. I am in touch with Jane Giles. I love the whole thing. I mean, they were modeling themselves to some degree on the kind of repertory programming that was happening stateside. But what was so cool to me was that they were taking the traditional repertory type programming that was popular in the UK, like the classic standards, Powell and Pressburger, for example, and then mashing it up with stuff that was just super visceral, really grotesque, and that you couldn't see in the theater. Like they had a 16 millimeter print of McDowell's Thundercrack that they played constantly. I never would have been able to see that in the theater, and how amazing it was. There's an entirely new experience that gets synthesized through the juxtaposition of these different kinds of movies, So they would do Preminger's Laura, followed by Singapore Sling, and there's a little bit of a thread in there. But still, it's just like, it was just a mind-blowing experience. During the pandemic, I was briefly in between jobs, and it was just enough time to devote an entire month to actually going through a Scala schedule chronologically and completely for that entire month. So I went through the September 1990 schedule, which is like 80 plus films. And I mean, I was doing the Saturday night double or triple feature, followed by the all-nighter as well. Yeah. Get a little sleep and then wake up and do whatever the Sunday program was. It was the most psychotic cinema experience I have ever had in my life. I was changed, and it took me 2 months to like physically recover from it. So for me, the Scala is everything. I mean, that's where the film education for me has always been, because it was just example after example of risk, formal risk, emotional risk, the subject matter. I mean, I had never really been exposed to queer cinema before the Scala, and it was amazing. It was so creative and so direct. Yeah, so the Scala to me is still very, very close to my heart. Any time I'm making a film, I'm thinking, well, is this something that might play at the Scala?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Some of the best experiences I've had are at obscure cinemas where I've been traveling, or in London. There's a great cinema called Screen on the Green.
Oh yeah.
The programming's good, but it's like there was when I traveled around Europe before university, I found a series of cinemas. I always liked the idea of going to a cinema in another country to see what the experience is like. And in North Wales, which isn't too far from here, there's a very small cinema that's just been refurbished about 15 years ago. And I used to go there as a child and kind of mid 90s as well. And I remember seeing Twister there, and loads of other big films. And I went back there years later to see, I think it was Rogue Nation. I think it was the Christopher McQuarrie Mission Impossible. And there's something, it wasn't about the film. It was just about being in the space and kind of soaking it up. Because I remember people walking down the aisle selling the ice cream when I was much younger. And in the south of France, where I saw, I think it was Fahrenheit 9/11, it was in a cinema that looked like a semi-detached house. It was really small. There's about 15 seats in the screen. And again, it wasn't necessarily about the film. It was about the actual experience itself. And that's, I've thought about that as well. How would this play out if I made a short, like I'm making a short film now, and I've been extremely lucky who I'm working with, because all the costumes and everything, it's being supplied by the company that work for this tour company, and they're really high-end costumes. They look like period. And I thought, how is this going to play out on a cinema screen? So yeah, I absolutely, I totally agree. The Scala's amazing, and there's one or two in Leicester Square. Like, I love. It used to be a Cineworld, and now I think it's another big company. But they've got underground screens, which is hugely appealing to me.
Cool.
And
Cool. I've never been to anything like that.
Yeah, it used to be called the Empire Cinema on Leicester Square, but there was one in New York I went to as well. It's underground, and there's something really kind of cavernous about going down to the screen and experience.
Sure, because you're leaving this world and going into an underworld.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the biggest appeal of cinema, isn't it? The escapism. And how
cool too that there's an entranceway that when you go through, the space itself is already starting to transform you. I had read I think this is right, in Peter Gabriel's biography, something about how they had experimented with that, I think with Genesis, that people would actually have to crouch down in order to get into the venue first. So it's literally briefly transforming you. You're having to engage with the space physically first.
Yeah.
So I love that stuff, and I think that's part of why the Scala was so thrilling, is because it was the opposite. You had to go up, added to the fact that the King's Cross tube ran every 15 minutes underneath it, so the theater would shake. Yeah. Plus cats were running around. The first time I ever saw The Exorcist at the Scala, one of the cats, Houston, its tail brushed underneath my leg during one of the scariest parts of the movie, and then the theater started to shake because of the tube. Like, that's cool.
I had a very similar experience watching the Innocents. Have you seen The Innocents?
The film with Deborah Kerr?
Yeah. And every time I saw my own reflection in a window, and then I just absolutely just had this kind of horror shock in me. And then I watched the series Haunting of Bly Manor, and it's really inspired by The Innocents. And that's the same shot they use when she's hiding behind the curtain from the kids. And I'm like, I know what's coming up. And then I remember all these memories of watching The Innocents in the cinema. And so, yeah, it's those little moments. There's I used to work as an usher in two different cinemas in Manchester and Chester here, and there was something quite special about that, being in the screen, knowing how people are going to react to certain films. And the craziest thing that happened, it was a 6-screen cinema in Chester. It was a really nice seat. It wasn't the stadium tiered seats. It was like just like a slight gentle curve decline to it. You know, there was really well sculpted screens in terms of the layout. It's not like anything now. And we were playing Stigmata, and screen 1 and 2, the way it was all projected on film at the time, went from one projector to the other. So they actually used 2 projectors on 2 different screens, but they had one reel. Brilliant idea. It was such a crazy system if you saw it upstairs, because it actually like went around the corner. It was a crazy system. And when I was at the back of the screen, I was watching Stigmata, and I'd already seen the film, and I love Gabriel Byrne. When Stigmata's happening, the film burnt on the bulb. It actually happened in the screen, and you think it's part of everyone, including myself and the other member of staff that were watching it, thought it was part of the film. And then it happens. You can hear it in the other screen that something goes wrong. It snapped, you know. So yeah, these little moments, like, you know, the time I fell in love with cinema was when I was watching. I was really drunk with a group of friend of ours, and we were watching, what was it? The Maltese Falcon. I'd never seen it. I hadn't really watched classic films at that point. And then I was the only one that was kind of transfixed by what was being said and the mood and the atmosphere. And that was the point for me when I started to love film. Just there's little touchstones throughout your life that have a real connection. But yeah, that's how I fell in love with film. But yeah, it's amazing, these little memories you have of seeing certain films, and yeah, it's great. And the Scarlet, going back to the Scarlet, where you see films is super key. Who you watch them with. Yeah, my fiance Vicky, she was a little bit jealous of myself and my friend Will, because we ended up seeing films we deeply loved together, and it was almost like away from my partner. Like we went to see Killing Them Softly with Dominic film. Just, I love Anamorphic, you see, and it was just a gorgeous film. And we loved everything about it, and it's deep. There's some deeply violent scenes in it, especially with Ray Liotta getting beaten up in the rain. It's one of the most visceral, I'd say, beatings in any film. And I saw it, and we loved it. And when I came home, Vicky was like, "Oh, how was the film?" Because usually, you know, films are okay. There's so many films to watch now. And I said, I absolutely loved it. I love Andrew Dominic. I think he's a brilliant film director. And Vicky was jealous then, you see. So we always have those little memories of my friends and that. Do you have a great place to watch films where you are now? In terms of like a cinema?
Yeah, my apartment. I mean, because cinemas they're still closed here. Yeah. And I actually just finished up a job that required a lot of overtime, and I had already been researching getting a projector. And so I had enough money, and then I was on eBay, and the projector I was looking for became available. So now I am like I have so many movies now that I need to watch as if for the first time. So I'm stoked about that. If that was not the case, living in LA, there's so many options for amazing cinema experiences, because there's so much reverence for the craft. A lot of these cinemas have tremendous pride in the technology that they're using in their space. That's not ever been a requirement, and the Scala is an example of that. But it is pretty badass to see a film in a space that is probably as good as the soundstage, for example, as the film was mixed on. For me, the best film of 2021 is the film that came out in 2018, which is Mandy. Mandy is so good, and I still think it's the best film of every year since it came out. So I saw Mandy first at the Egyptian, which is an historic theater in LA, and I saw it at the Vista, which has cameos in other movies, like it's in True Romance. And I saw Mandy. Then I flew to Portland, Oregon. I flew back home because rumor was it really wasn't going to be playing for very long in LA. The distributor was like, this is just going to go straight to video. They didn't know what they had. So I saw it at the Hollywood Theater, which is another historic theater that's in Portland. I saw it at Cinema 21, which is another really great art house cinema in Portland. Anyway, the point is, every single screening that I went to was radically different from each other. It was the equivalent of following a band and seeing how they played in each different venue. I can't explain. I mean, the film I think is just, the only explanation I have is that the film is that alive, that it's that responsive to its environment where it plays. So the last time I saw it was at the ArcLight on Sunset, which is where the Cinerama Dome is. Oh, yeah. And that was the time when I thought, oh, well, this must have been, what I'm experiencing now must be exactly what Panos Cosmatos and his colorist saw, and then what he was hearing on the sound stage. And it was absolutely perfect. And I'm not saying that was the best screening though either. Sometimes those limitations, I mean, kind of the whole thing we've been talking about is how does the audience interact with their space, with one another, and the film. They all go together. And that's the thing I'm obviously missing when I'm at home with this new projector, is that as I'm going through my library of favorite films, I'm feeling a certain kind of objectivity that I wouldn't feel if I was seeing it in a cinema.
Yeah.
So it's more of a technical appreciation than it is an involvement. So yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. The first time I was messaging my partner was, I think it was 2014. I think it was Interstellar was coming out, and a friend and I were traveling to London and thought, right, we need to see this on the BFI IMAX. And the one that's in the middle of the road. It's a unique space, and I thought, right, I have to. It's being projected on 70mm film. I have to go and see it. This is the way to watch this film, and I knew how the audio was synced in terms of these gold discs they have, and it was in terms of connecting with the film and all of that. And 20 minutes or so into the film, the audio goes out of sync with the film, and it's a rare occurrence. And because I used to work as a cinema as an usher, and there was a real disconnection straight away from the experience. So when I explained to the usher, said it's out of sync, said it's not possible, said it is possible. I hate saying the whole thing, I used to be an usher, because it sounds kind of pathetic. And then I said to him, it's out of sync, please check this. And then they resolved it. And halfway, the big reveal about the huge actor that comes out the cryo box in the film snaps on IMAX in the BFI, and I was just absolutely devastated. And then it came back. They couldn't sort it, because obviously I knew what you had to do. They'd have to fix the film, so they actually switched to the digital version of the film, and it was just like this whole thing. Right, I said I have to just leave. Everyone got a full, could watch the film, and everyone got a complimentary ticket or a refund, and it was, it's amazing. It was. It's the shared experiences. Like, everyone had the shared experience of it being really dreadful screening. It's interesting. And like, if I go to see a film with my parents, I need the experience to be great for them, because they don't go very often. So yeah, it's really interesting. You say, when you watched Mandy, because Mandy's amazing. I watched it with all the lights off because I knew what I was kind of going to watch. Because a few friends of mine, who I like their taste, they said you've got to buy this, buy it on Blu-ray, watch it at home, because I didn't manage to see it in the cinema, and I it was like a dream watching it. I felt like I was in a dream. It's just a beautiful film. I think Nicolas Cage has made some really interesting choices, especially that and Color Out of Space. I loved watching that as well.
Same editor, Brett Bachman.
Yeah, and it was like you say, the color, the just like the kind of nature of it. When I've got an experience like that, and I don't necessarily understand everything, it doesn't really matter. Sometimes it's kind of let the film wash over me, and that's what I got with Manda. I thought it was a beautiful film. So what I'm just to kind of take it back to Big Touch. Did you have that experience of different kinds of audiences watching your film? Because from my point of view, I think it would be completely different from someone else's in terms of the experience they get. What was the kind of the feed? Was it the same kind of feedback you were getting? Was it kind of radically different depending on which kind of festival we're seeing it?
Oh man. Although Big Touch has been pretty popular with festivals so far, I think we're just around hitting our 50th around now, and we had started submitting in August of 2020. I have no idea how to answer that question, unfortunately, because everything is online.
Yeah.
I don't find that at at best, maybe another filmmaker who's in the same short film strand might follow me on social media, and that's it. So that has been the hardest part about being a filmmaker and getting a film out into particularly a short film, is that I'm just absolutely lacking any kind of audience response. And as much as it's always a very important first step for the festival to say yes, in the end, I really do want to have an answer for you.
Yeah,
That's
because you
the
want to
whole
you want to
reason.
be you want to be at the back of the screen, don't you? You really want to get a sense. You want a real sense of that, and that's a great point. It's extremely difficult to do that because it just disappears. You press submit, that's it. That's what I like about because we try and build a connection with a lot of our filmmakers and our audience. After the fact, after the films have shown on the weekend, that we do it in June, and we did something similar last year, and it's really nice in a very small way to see that feedback live when we have our live event, and you get that real kind of feedback. Then, obviously, it's just a few words on online, but it's really really nice to see that, and just to see a similar thing that I see live, because obviously I curate the festival. So yeah, feedback must be extremely difficult, especially with a watching audience.
Yeah,
What
it's
was
just absent.
what was it like when the crew or everyone that was involved with the film, when they finally saw it? What was kind of response you were getting within the team?
Um, well, I think I'd like to give you the long answer for that, which includes what the experience was like making the film with that crew first.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so because that's just an easier question for me to answer, because everybody who was involved in the film was also so busy with other projects, that there wasn't a whole lot of time to have that kind of conversation. I had not made any kind of film like as a writer director for about 20 years, and everybody on the crew was significantly younger than I. And at the beginning of every day on a set, there's a safety meeting. Everybody gets together and they just kind of do a review, check in with each other. And with any luck, the director has something that's positive or helpful to say to the crew. And for me, it was simply that I'm basically a tourist on their set, that although I might be making creative decisions, I'm absolutely relying upon them to help me when I get lost. So I would like to think that, and it was only a 2-day shoot, I would like to think that in those 2 days, people knew just how much I cared about how they were contributing, that I would not have been able to have done what I needed to do had it not been for their attention to details and care. I've always fantasized that if the film is suitable for this kind of atmosphere, that an atmosphere on set ought to be a pretty loving one, that it should be like not a party out of control party, but the kind of party where people are really telling each other, they're being honest with each other about how much they appreciate each other. So there was always music playing. I always had dance music, like Frankie Knuckles, some kind of house music that was playing. And so people were dancing while the crew was setting up, the crew was dancing. Because the film is all about a hug, there was a lot of hugging. We'd have to position the camera and get either the talent in a hug, or when they weren't available because they needed a break, then the crew was hugging. So there was a lot of hugging and dancing on the set. So I would like to think that the way that we were all engaging with each other was why the film is as effective as it is. Yes, it was also heavily planned. My cinematographer and we did a previs. Like I said before, I'm from the world of animation. He also had an animation background, so we wanted to, and we knew we only had 2 days. So we planned it as much as we possibly could, which then did the things that planning does, which is allows for mistakes, failures, and then also a little bit of relaxation so that people can feel comfortable being themselves. So the thing that was a little bit of a downer for me being back on the set with a crew that was so professional is that at the end of both days, as soon as we wrapped, because we were also, even though none of the actors were getting paid, we still were abiding by SAG rules. So it's a hard out at the end of each day. So as soon as we wrapped, the crew was still working. And then I remember just sitting there feeling like, where are the hugs? Where's the dancing? What can I do? I'm just here, and I can kind of help out, but there really is something that, like, the magic happens between this minute and then this minute, and then everybody is done. and I love cinema so much that when I'm watching movies, I forget that it's a construct myself. And I forgot again on set that I was making the construct, but it didn't stop me from feeling kind of lonely on set, that I wanted that party to continue, and I wanted friendships to, like, go beyond the day, which, I don't know, maybe that says more about me as a person than, but I maybe that is a common experience that people have as head of departments. I don't really know. Then the other thing that I remember feeling as I sat there watching everybody else was, and I'm saying this because I absolutely would not be who I am if it wasn't for Jim Henson, but I really wondered if I was ever going to have a vision that was outside of the realm of what can be found on Sesame Street. I mean, to me, like the use of colors that we were using and the sentiment behind it, although it's honest and simple, maybe because of its honesty and simplicity, I just thought, oh, maybe I will never get to that place where I can do something that's as complicated as Cassavetes or as provocative as Radley Metzger. Maybe I'm stuck in this semi-arrested development in my own creativity. So coming back to like an audience response, I was just thrilled that my doubt was that it dissolved from how much it was just opening people's hearts in a way. I mean, when people have talked about it, they've used the word pure, and I can't think of a better compliment. Like, and that doesn't mean just pure in its intent, but pure in its execution as well. So that's really all I ever want, is for a future audience to feel like somehow a little bit more free, and that they've been given permission to be more emotionally honest with themselves, and that there is nothing but strength in vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely. The color in the film, how was everything kind of planned as part of the previs, or is it the kind of palette of the film? Was that a mixture of in pre-production and in post? Because the colors when I first watched the film, I first started the film, I was in the kitchen, my little dog was with me, Frida, and as soon as I started it, I thought, I can't watch it on this TV. I have to go in the living room. I have to put it on the OLED screen. I've got a surround sound. I have to watch it on that. That's my initial thought when I started the film. I thought I have to watch this the best way I can, because I felt like I'd be doing the film a disservice. That's how I felt from it straight away. I thought, right, I have to go into the room. So when I watched the film, and I thought, the color, there was something really kind of, I was just kind of hooked straight away, and the uses of it, and yeah, because we all love in cinema, car parks, underground car parks, and the pools of light and everything. I think the cinematography, I think the two of you, in terms of the previs and what you worked out, and the positions, the low angles, to really emphasize kind of, it was Astra, wasn't it? Your lead. I thought she did an amazing job, and I see on the film Freeway that it was her first film, and yeah, the way you shot her, and there's this almost kind of magical fantasy moment where the technique you use when she goes to touch the chap on the shoulder, I love the kind of movement. There was something really kind of surreal about it, and yeah, and the most engaging moment is obviously when his body settles. And I was like, wow, this is great. And I was immensely proud for the festival that I got a film from someone like yourself. Honestly, it was this. I thought this is one of the reasons we started this, was to see something like this. Honestly, that's the best compliment I can pay you. Is like when I saw that Fly film last year, this young student made a black and white animation, and he put so much work into it, and just about this life of a fly during isolation. I thought, yeah, that was the moment for me last year when I thought it was worth all the work, all the admin, because there's a hell of a lot of admin. So thank you so much, Chris, for submitting the film. It's a beautiful piece of work.
Thank you. Well, that's deeply meaningful to hear. It's been a real. I mean, I want to get back to some of the thoughts that you were expressing about the film, but it's been I think for any filmmaker, it's a real journey in getting the film out to an audience via festivals, because it's easy to think, well, why isn't my film getting into this festival and that festival, when in fact each festival it's kind of a living, breathing thing, and you don't always connect. The film doesn't always connect with every festival, and I'm grateful that the festivals who do like it, I also like that festival. And it's not just because they chose our film. I like all of the things that they're choosing and the way that they're presenting themselves, both maybe aesthetically as well as the ideology that they're trying to get out there. And Big Touch has been landing really well with the fantastic film festivals, which is a surprise to me because those tend to lean towards gore and sci-fi, so it's either high concept or death. And then for Hugs to somehow find a home in that world just is kind of a mind-blowing thing. But I do see what they all have in common, which is that they're all visceral experiences, and one is hoping for an emotional experience through that kind of bodily experience. So it makes me a little bit verklempt to hear you say that, just because every filmmaker hears so many rejections, and so then there's so much doubt that sets in about, like, well, where's my home? Where's my family in the community on a global level? Which is that's huge. Where do I fit in the entire world of film? It's a huge thing. So thank you for saying that. It really means a lot to hear. All of us will feel that way, and I'm happy to share that with Astra as well.
I thought it was the kind of the softness to, there's certain elements to it I love, like the softness to the catchlight in her eyes and her expression at the end, and there's no I don't want to kind of spoil it for anyone that hasn't seen it, but it's, my initial thought when I look back at it is, why this is just a kind of internal processing once I watched it a few times. Like, I love how you use the sound of the lift button, but you don't hear the sound of the mother or the child. And I thought, this is something completely different. And then I think the way it's shot, the shot choices are really, really, really nice. And I love how the other character is almost like a gargoyle, and then you've kind of taken his pain away with the touch and the hug. And I don't want to get too emotional about this, but I contracted COVID in December, and I had full-blown pneumonia. I was in hospital for 2 weeks, intensive care, all of that. And I actually got my test results on the day I was supposed to get married, and it's been cancelled twice. So there was flowers around the door. I was getting wheeled out of my house in a wheelchair. I went to hospital, and that was Christmas. And so, I feel like I've opened up a bit more emotionally, and I've always been that kind of person anyway. So, it really resonated me quite well in terms of the touch and that feeling and what you were striving for. And when I read your kind of breakdown of the film in Film Freeway, it really kind of went, this is, you kind of, it was one of the reasons that we started this, was to give people a place to kind of put their creativity during this kind of crazy period we went through. And so when did you start making the film, and was it still in post during lockdown last year?
I finished at the American Film Institute in 2019. And so it was part of that schooling, but it wasn't until the beginning of August that I was actually totally done with it. Like we had to screen it before graduation, but there were just some tweaky things that I felt had to change in order for it to look good enough for digital. So it was shot on 35 millimeter. The genesis of the project is that the cinematographer said to me, Chris, let's make a film on 35 that really has to only be made on 35. Like we have to make something. 35 millimeter film is tactile, and so we need to make a film that's about that. So I mean that's a really abbreviated version of it, but and so he really wanted to emphasize texture on screen through the medium, but I was seeing a lot of dirt and hair, and I didn't want to see any of the dirt or the hair, and we had no money to deal with that. So for months, without knowing how to use the technology, I painted out all of the dirt and the hair.
Oh,
I wanted it to be clean because I didn't want the audience to be reminded that it was a movie. You know, I wanted them to be in it, and I'm nuts. So I felt like if we're getting this film out into the world and the majority of people are shooting digitally and the screen is digital, then it's gonna have to look as good as digital, but the texture is still going to be there inherent in the grain. So
the grains are gorgeous.
Yeah, agreed. And I wish I could share with you the actual master file, because it really is beautiful. I mean, Tech is the cinematographer, and when we were at AFI, I think it was our 5th film that we did together, and we have tremendous shorthand creatively. Also, he's a foodie and I cook, so there's that part of our relationship as well. We eat a lot and we drink a lot, and we're lucky if we can do the previs to get the film off the ground. But somehow, because we know each other pretty well and we have such similar taste, we get there pretty effortlessly.
That shorthand is so, it doesn't matter what level of filmmaking, that shorthand is so key, because with that shorthand, you know, there's a level of trust between the two of you as well. And yeah, it's evident, it really is in your film. Was the music pre-existing, or was it written for the film?
Sheku Kane Nathan was the performer. I had written the script, and I thought this whole thing is going to hinge on whatever the music is. I had read a long time ago in my leaner years that Kubrick felt that there was absolutely no reason to ever hire a composer for anything, because there has been so much great music written over the centuries. It's just a matter of going back in time to look for it. I've always remembered that, and I always thought, I don't have the money to hire somebody who's really great anyway. So I found that piece of music first. Then I saw that Sheku Kane Mesa had performed it, and I was like, oh my God, like, it's a great performance. It's a great recording. He's still a somewhat new artist as well, so we thought that the licensing would be doable, and thank God they were accommodating to us that we could use that. And we designed the film around that performance.
Yeah, it has this kind of, you could almost hear the performance in the space in terms of the actual car park itself. That's how it felt. And it had this kind of real kind of clean air to it. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. I think you produced a great piece of work, Chris. I think it's really, really nice. I can't wait for more of the people I know and the filmmakers that have submitted. I can't wait for them to see it, because I think and I really, really enjoyed it. And I don't have a huge casting say in terms of casting votes or choices or anything like that. But because I'm just emotionally honest when it comes to film, I'll tell you when I hate a film, and I'll tell you when I love a film. Like I sometimes come out of this cinema raging about something, or like I've wasted 2 hours of my time. Like the last Indiana Jones film, I was like seething for days because I felt I felt it was a violation to me and to my
Alex,
eyeballs.
that is such a long harboring resentment you have
Oh
because that
yeah,
was
yeah.
like 20 years
I
ago
know.
or more.
I know. I'm like, what am I seeing? I know. I need to let these things go, as my partner says. I need to let these things go. But yeah, but when you see a great film like Mandy or Color Out of Space, it kind of really puts me back to there are really enjoyable films. There are great films still. There is new ideas, and it's so difficult to see like indie films have kind of. It's really difficult to get a film greenlit, as you know better than I. But when you see small films doing really well, like I watched a film. I think it was Akiko did the poster designer did the poster for I think Cop Car with Kevin Bacon, and it's such a great tight short small budget film, but absolutely compelling. Because if you haven't seen it, you should definitely watch it. There's two kids find this police car, and Kevin Bacon's the police officer in it. It's a wonderful film, and it kind of reassures me there are great ideas still happening. And that's what I loved about your film. I thought it was, yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I can't wait for Nadia and Michael and the other people that are part of the festival as well. I think they'll absolutely love it. Because Nadia, who's a content curator, she's like, don't give me any spoilers. Don't tell me anything. I want to watch everything in one hit. Like, I wouldn't watch everything in one hit. I'd watch over a week because last year we had quite a lot of submissions. So when you watch a lot of films or films throughout the night, like at the Scala, you get this, you have this otherworldly experience. Because I've done all nighters, Mystery Science 3000, and yeah, your headspace can be somewhere else, when you're watching all nighters. So I've said to the team, the few members of our festival team, don't watch everything at once. It's just because you're kind of. I don't think you do the filmmakers justice, and then we want to make sure our judges see them the right way as well. So we're kind of working all that over the next few weeks or so. But yeah, thank you again, Chris, and thank you for being part of this interview as well. Since I saw the film, I was like, I have to speak to Chris about this film. But yeah, so yeah, just one little last thing. What's the HBO animation show you're working on?
I had been on a reboot of a series called The Boondocks, which was a popular. Oh, I can't remember what year it went off the air, but I think it was on for 4 years.
Was that Funny or Die?
No.
That was on. Yeah, because there was the original version was on. What was it on? It was online somewhere, wasn't it? What channel was that on originally? Was it on HBO?
No, it wasn't HBO. Maybe it was in the States. It was, I think. Oh, I don't want to speculate on it. I'll get it wrong. Anyway, So I was on Boondocks, and then the pandemic hit, and so then it got postponed. And so that was when I had like a couple of months of no work, and then that's when I watched all the Scala films. And then, but all of this was through Sony Pictures Animation. So an opportunity opened up for me to jump back into Sony. And I've kind of had my finger in practically every project that they'll be releasing in the next 2 years. Somebody had told me, I didn't know that. Somebody on the tech department was like, you've worked on Vivo, you've worked on Mitchell and the Machines, you've worked on this and that. So, and actually that's the thing that I have to go back to. And I'm so lucky to be employed in my industry right out of school again. And all of the people I work with at Sony are so sweet and professional and so talented. I'm just so blessed, during this time when, including yourself, it's been really, really, really rough. I've had nothing but good luck, and it's all been luck, and I think, like I said before, vulnerability is a real power, and I'd like to think that any forward mobility that I've had so far and will continue to have is because either the way that I carry myself in this world or the kinds of projects that I want to associate myself with somehow promote that and give permission for people to really be themselves, like their best vulnerable self. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you, Alexander.
Because I know everyone's work's ramping up, and especially what you've mentioned, things will ramp up quickly and things can get very busy. But I'll keep you updated when little decisions are made, how we're going to showcase the films, making sure all the filmmakers are happy with what we're doing with little clips with the films and making sure everyone's happy with that. So we won't really do anything for the live event until we've spoken to all the filmmakers and without trying to spoil things as well. So yeah, it should be really interesting in the next month or so. And then we have our live event on the 27th of June. And then we're hoping to showcase all the officially selected films on the Saturday. And then we have a live event, which is a monster to put together. But we did it last year, and that was fine. And I'll tell you a little thing that happened last year as well for the Hellbound Festival. So we had Joe Alves, the production designer of Jaws, my favorite movie. He was one of the judges. And we had Alex Proyas, who's the director of The Crow. He picked our best film last year for Hellbound. And he sent me a script of what he was going to say about the nominees and which film he picked. And he says, if you need any adjustments to the script, please let me know. Please let me know what you think of my script. And I was being sent a script from the director of Dark City, which I love so much. It was just kind of other surreal moments. So we've had that with our current judges. I love Akiko's work. Her work's fantastic. Garth de Bruyne Austin, Michael, and Jessica Chan, who are the podcast hosts of Talking with a Mouthful, based out of Toronto. It's a pleasure working with those judges, and they'll get to see your film, and I can't wait for them to give us feedback and to kind of pass that on. And yeah, I'll keep you up to date with where the festival's up to as well.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for your generosity. I really appreciate it.
At any time, my friend. And yeah, good luck with Boondocks as well.
Thank you. All right, take care.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.